Smiling and waving, hand on heart, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian, as he marched alongside crowds the government asked to come out in support. As videos like this one show the bodies of those who oppose it lying in morgues, the cries of a relative off-screen but unmistakable. As the regime-imposed internet blackout enters its fifth day, snapshots of what Iranian authorities don't want you to see continue to emerge slowly and with caution. These images, too distressing and dangerous for relatives to show unblurred, reveal families looking for their loved ones among the dead, with so many body bags that some are left lying outside. Just how many have been killed is still unknown. An Iranian official told Reuters the death toll was now at 2,000, while rights groups say it could be much higher. A spokesperson for the UN human rights chief today said he was horrified not just by the violence meted out by security forces against protesters, but suggestions they could soon face the death penalty.
It is also extremely worrying to see public statements by some judicial officials indicating the possibility of the death penalty being used against protesters through expedited judicial proceedings. The High Commissioner stresses that Iranians have the right to demonstrate peacefully. Their grievances need to be heard and addressed, and not instrumentalized by anyone.
2 weeks ago, President Trump said if Iran killed protesters, the US would come to their rescue and was, quote, locked and loaded and ready to go. Today, he posted help is on its way, telling Iranians, take over your institutions and save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. US fighter jets have increased their activity in Qatar, close to the Iranian border, and Trump is today being briefed by aides on a raft of responses from military to cyber attacks. Yesterday, Iran said it was ready for war, but with a conciliatory caveat.
As I have repeatedly said, we are also ready for negotiation.
Ahead of his meeting, Trump deployed one of his favourite weapons, slapping a 25% tariff on countries continuing to trade with Iran, angering China, its largest trading partner.
China's position on tariffs is very clear. There are no winners in a tariff war. China will firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
The pressure on Iran's clerical leadership is growing from within and beyond its borders, the German Chancellor today predicting its imminent downfall.
If a regime can only keep itself in power by force, then it's effectively at an end. I believe we are now seeing the final days and weeks of this regime. In any case, it has had no legitimate elections. The population is now rising up against this regime. I hope there is a possibility to end this conflict peacefully.
This is a regime aware of its own jeopardy, its proxies abroad weakened, its population hitting breaking point under decades of repression, soaring inflation and international sanctions. Instead of offering concessions, its strategy for now is to intensify the crackdown, with rights groups saying executions of protesters are set to begin tomorrow. I'm now joined by Ali Vaez, the International Crisis Group's Iran Project Director. Thank you for joining us. Now, the German Chancellor says that this is a regime in its final days and weeks. Is he right?
Well, look, people have been making these predictions for years now. There's no doubt that a system like the Islamic Republic is bound to eventually fail. But as it has demonstrated in this round of protests, it still has the will and a fearsome capacity for repression. But inevitably, change is around the corner for Iran. Iran's supreme leader is 86 years old, and so succession will be around the corner. And at the same time, the regime has demonstrated that it is able to suppress protests, but is not able to address the underlying causes.
How different does this feel, for example, to the uprising in 2022?
Well, the difference here is that the number of people who came to the streets is really cuts across the social class, gender, geography. There was really a national sense of the country being at a dead end and people being fed up with living under miserable economic situation. There was also something else that was unique about it, which is this convergence of internal pressures on the regime and external threats. The Islamic Republic has dealt with each of these threats separately, but it has rarely dealt with both at the same time.
So people are still going out onto the streets. Can you tell me about some of the things you've heard about the way in which the government is acting towards them?
Well, look, there is no doubt that in the beginning, the Iranian government wanted to find maybe a peaceful way out of this, but this was too little, too late. There's such a sense of frustration within the society that cannot be addressed with marginal reforms. It really requires fundamental reforms. And since the regime is unable and unwilling to move down that path, it has, as usual, used lethal force to try to break down and clamp down on these protests.
What evidence do you have for that lethal force? Can you talk us through some of the things that you've been seeing and hearing?
It appears that we're already in the category of several thousand fatalities. In addition to the fact that thousands of people, tens of thousands of people have likely been arrested. And the regime is usually not done by the time that its crackdown succeeds in deterring people from coming to the streets. It would then go to instill fear among the population by resorting to executions. The regime uses them to set an example so that other protesters would not come out to the streets. And in fact, the Revolutionary Guards did send a message through text message to many in Iran that ask parents to prevent their children from coming out lest they will be killed. So the regime is not hiding the atrocities that it has committed because it wants them to serve as a deterrent to the population.
And were Iran's leadership to topple, what do you think would happen next, given that its institutions are so steeped with regime forces, regime loyalists, and that there doesn't appear to be any opposition infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, in a scenario of regime implosion, it is possible that some other parts of the system, just like what happened in Venezuela, would take over. But Iran also has the same fault lines, ethnic and sectarian, that have resulted in civil strife elsewhere in the region, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen. And so it is also possible that it would descend into violent chaos. There is that risk as well. And one has to be aware of what one is wishing for, because right now there's more than 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, which is near weapons grade uranium, that is unaccounted for in Iran after the last June war between Iran and Israel. And if Iran descends into chaos, this material is enough for 10 nuclear weapons and maybe dozens of dirty bombs. It would create a major security breach for the entire international community, and especially for Israel and the United States.
There's been lots of talk of Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, obviously a controversial figure for some. He's been talking about a transition to democracy. Do you think that's possible? And do you think it's possible with any involvement from him as well? Is there a role for him in this?
Look, his stock has certainly been improving in the past few months. In fact, he has name recognition, he has a platform, he has foreign support, and so there's no doubt that he's much more visible. But the problem that he has leading a revolution from exile is, unlike Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, who toppled his father. He doesn't have a network inside the country, doesn't have organization inside the country. And without that kind of logistical support, it's very difficult to topple an entrenched regime.
Mm-hmm. And my last question, what route is there to democracy in Iran? How do you see that working?
Well, I think what the West can do is to come in between and create a triangular way of trying to help the Iranian people transition to a democratic situation by making sanctions relief conditional on meaningful political reforms, open, free, and fair elections, maybe even a referendum on a new constitution inside the country. The West has always dealt with Iran on security matters, on its nuclear program, on its regional policies, but it has rarely tried to connect the dots and try to create incentives for political reform inside the country. And take into account that the elements within the regime also, when they don't see an exit ramp, they double down on repression in order to preserve their vested political and economic interest in the system. And the West, through its leverage of diplomatic and economic pressure, it can try to find an exit ramp that would provide a soft landing for everyone, Iranian people, the region, and the West.
Ali Vaez, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.